This podcast is brought to you by the School of Advanced Study, University of London. All of our podcasts are available from our website, www.sas.ac.uk.
Good morning, everybody. I'm very happy and proud and pleased to welcome you today to the Warburg Institute. This is a day that I, at least, and I think most people in the Institute have been looking forward to all year, really. Well, from about June last year, I would say. And I don't know about your experience, but I can hardly think in my whole life of a nicer morning than the hour and a half that I just spent in the gallery. And I have to thank our friends in the gallery for their extraordinary generosity to us in that respect. And I hope that, and in fact I believe and think on good grounds that there will be other collaborations between the Institute and the gallery. Of course, I'm always also very happy that we've managed to assemble such a cast of extraordinary Leonardo scholars to speak to us today. Some of them, of course, from the podium, but also many of them from the audience as well. And so, I'm just going to delay you a couple more minutes, but as I say, I'm looking forward to today with great anticipation, and I expect and hope that we'll have a wonderful time. I need to thank the National Gallery for their support. I also need to thank the School of Advanced Study and the Dean's Development Fund, who gave us some money, which was partly making this conference possible. I also need to thank the Crest Foundation and Max Marmer, who very generously have supported the transatlantic airfares and some of the hotel accommodation for this conference. Max is devastated that he's not able to be here today, and he was even contemplating sort of flying in yesterday evening and flying out this evening, but it just wouldn't work with the rest of his schedule. I need to say a couple of practical things. Many of you will know the layout of this building, but there are toilets on almost every floor. But you do please need to remember that there's also the issue of the security of the library. So from time to time people may say, please don't go there, or actually will definitely ask to see your bags. I hope you'll understand that the way the building is designed, it's very hard for us to let people into the building without them potentially being able to go into the library too. But I guess the way I want to end this introduction is probably the thing that you would expect me to say first. I think we've all this winter been overwhelmed by the extraordinary choice of objects, the arrangement of the museum, the generosity of the Royal Library in lending that extraordinary group of drawings. But above all, of course, we must express our admiration and thanks to Luke Sison for arranging this wonderful, wonderful exhibition. And fortunately, I'm now going to introduce him to chair the first panel. So, well done.
Why don't people sit down before I you stepped up to the platform blushing furiously. And I wanted to say my own thank you, especially to Peter, but also to the Warburg for a very long time. Some of you know that I'm living in London. I've actually already left London. And what some of you don't know is that I live on the other side of Russell Square, and one of the reasons for doing that is so I could be an easy walking distance in the Institute. Everything about this place has nurtured everything I've done for the last 20 years, and I shall miss this place absolutely extraordinarily. I hope that in some sense the experience of the exhibition and its catalogue has been informed by the long hours that I spent sitting upstairs in the museum. The intimidating shelf of books on Leonardo, but also the extraordinary capacity to run a small library. We've had a series of events around this show. A couple of weeks ago, a great 2 days on the technical analysis of Leonardo's paintings. But I was very, very keen when Peter suggested it that should be balanced by by another view, by a set of analyses which are perhaps less fixated on layer structure and underdrawing, and more, I'm thinking more about larger meaning. And I'm expecting to learn a great deal, especially since this is a territory that I find difficult and continuing to. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce the first of these difficult and intimidating. So yes, not at all difficult. Easy, but nonetheless slightly intimidating. Alessandro, no, I'm not going to involve introductions about people's biographies, but just to say that the principles of he's a man for the invitation, Luke Sison, for his wonderful invitation. Unfortunately, I couldn't see only for a few hours this morning, but that is a once-in-a-lifetime experience and possibility. No other Renaissance artist has pondered the problem of how to represent air, wind, and their effects in painting as thoroughly as Leonardo, who, for theoretical as well as aesthetic reasons, was particularly attracted by the challenge of depicting as realistically as possible these natural phenomena. This doesn't mean, however, that Leonardo completely abandoned the iconographic conventions established since the late Hellenistic period. Conventions which were still used up to the late Middle Ages and even in Leonardo's own times. Indeed, in a drawing now in the Royal Library at Windsor, the artist sketched a highly dramatic scene of obscure meaning in which he has resorted to two different modes of representation for reproducing the wind, namely the personification of the phenomenon with its classical iconographic attributes and the apparent movement of the objects caused by the whirlwind, what Oeuvre called the Dekes Beiwerk, and I think it's appropriate to mention his work on the wind in this room. To these two modes of representation, Leonardo has headed for the first time in art history, as far as I can see, but perhaps this is always a very dangerous thing to say, abstract signs, which we must see and interpret correctly if we want to understand the complexity of Leonardo's image. At the upper left, and amid the clouds at the center, some figures and two gigantic putti, as we will see, is compared with the horsemen at the lower right, blow into trumpets, attributes of the winds in the classical tradition. At first glance, the two putti are barely visible. I mean, it is this figure here and that figure there. But if one looks more carefully, they reveal themselves to the onlooker. One of them is slightly shifted to the right of the center at the upper edge of the sheet, and almost seems to grasp to serious clouds, basically here, while the other, its cheeks swollen, is located a few inches below, to the left of the center line. Basically this figure here, and I hope that now you can see them better. What is actually represented in this drawing is not relevant in our context. It is another point that must be emphatically stressed, namely the persistence of what at this point in history are extremely ancient iconographic conventions, mixed, however, with the desire of rendering the phenomenon in its natural form, both through the hyperbole of trees forcefully bent over by the wind at the bottom right, and through the abstract sign of vortices of air and waves of ether that mix with the cumulus clouds at the upper left and at the center of the composition, basically these spiraling, so to speak, forms. This mixing of visual codes, iconographical attributes, the Dekes Beiwerk and sign is an intriguing, indeed extremely rich and rare strategy.
A completely different set of problems can be seen in the spectacular series of 11, although some think 10 sketches that describe a terrible cataclysm. The function and subject of these famous drawings remain mysterious to my mind. The only clear element is the series. In the series are the houses, the village, if not an actual town, surrounded by rich vegetation, and a fortress that you can see here at the bottom right, which gradually disappears from the scene beneath the threat of sea and the storm, sea waves and the storm. It is probably not correct to interpret these sketches as a sequence. I don't believe that. In part because the situations depicted in the various sheets are not homogeneous. In any case, whatever their meaning and function may have been, our analysis here must focus on other factors, i.e., the struggle among the elements recalled in numerous writings by the artist, which parallel at least what we see in these drawings. Secondly, Leonardo's visualization of the tempest as pure natural phenomenon, as a pure phenomenon. And third, the technical means he employed to achieve the desired atmospheric effects. Two folios, always from the Royal Collection, are replete with a mass of densely packed information about the origin of the winds, in large part derived from medieval sources such as Alberto Magno and Ristoro d'Arezzo. They date to approximately 1513, and 2 years later, the artist threw himself into a daring description of the flood and its demonstration in painting on 2 pages, recto and verso of the same folio, equally densely packed with notes, and it is this bit here. The opening words of the text written on the verso are particularly valuable. Leonardo writes, one could see the dark and nebulous air tormented by contrary winds, whirling incessant rain and mingled with hail, and the infinity of broken branches entangled with countless leaves. All around, one could see ancient trees uprooted, torn to pieces by the fury of the storm. Thus, one might be tempted to connect these evocative words to the series of the flood, except for the fact that the artist then goes on to describe other features. Men, women, and their children weep, frightened by the sun, thunder, and lightning, crouching on the ground with their hands over their ears to defend themselves from the terrifying noise of the hurricane. It's an auditory dimension. I think that this description of Leonardo has an auditory dimension, acoustic dimension, which we should keep in mind if we want to see his sketches with greater sensitivity, even with greater accuracy. However, nothing of this is seen in the winter drawings series, unlike 2 canvases by Nicolas Poussin, as we shall see later. Therefore, we should not fall into the mistake of interpreting the sketches as illustrations of text. This is certainly not the case. Leonardo's graphic works always had a high cognitive value for themselves. They were, so to speak, as one says, scientific tools for analyzing and perceiving the surrounding world with a different medium, not only with words. And while it is true that in certain drawings of the series we still encounter signs of human life, the series concludes with a triumph of nature in its supremacy and immensity. Boundaries seems to disappear, and the observer is denied any point of orientation. The entire space on the left is occupied by the fury of the elements. Bottom and top, right and left no longer exist, and everything merges for Leonardo, using purely graphic means, investigates the essence of the phenomenon, and I think in this case anticipating the aesthetics of the sublime. There is in his writings an attention for the aesthetic of the sublime 2 centuries before, so to speak, and we always must remember that the Peri Ipsos on the sublime of the Pseudo Longinus was published for the first time in the 16th century, indeed a few years later, but still the ideas were circulating. Why did Leonardo use black chalk to draw the vision of the blind brutality of nature? The techniques he preferred early in his career, silver point drawing or pen dipped in brown ink, transmit the precision of the boundaries. It is true that it is in Comparative Culti he had already emancipated himself from the 15th century clear pen line, but only the use of red chalk and above all black chalk allowed Leonardo, in part following in the wake of his teacher Verrocchio, to achieve sfumato effects. A technique which has the quality of expanding the perception of time, as Frank Fehrenbach has brilliantly suggested. Since the eye needs to constantly focus and refocus in order to distinguish the uncertain outlines of the borders of the objects and to reconstruct what the graphic medium leaves partly unexpressed. With extraordinary virtuosity, the artist has exploited the lighter tones of the paper to achieve even more expressive contrasts with the parts drawn in dark chalk. But the way in which Leonardo created a veritable repertory of curved, twisting, or spiral signs to render the turbulence of the air is perhaps even more brilliant and moves closer to the results of his highly evocative language, like the one on the right-hand side. Of all the information outlined above, we should stress 2 fundamental points for our topic. The empirical, experimental observation of the world indicated a decisive turning point in the history of the perception of the wind and its representation. Since Leonardo was no longer content with personification, but wanted to represent the turbulence and vortex of the storm, the air currents, and the movement of their masses purely as natural phenomena. Purely as natural phenomena. Furthermore, the Florentine artist did not limit himself to representing the effects created by the wind, such as the bending of tree tops, but developed a system of conventional graphic signs capable of visualizing it. I'm insisting on this point of his conventional graphic signs. In the 6th section of his book on painting, you note dating to approximately 1510-15, Leonardo jotted down his observation that trees and meadows seems lighter when seen from windward, since the stormy gust uncovers the undersides of the leaves, which are normally less dark than the side facing up. It is a brilliant empirical observation which, if applied to painting, contributes to the truthfulness of the mimetic fiction and of the historia. No one before Leonardo had observed this phenomenon with such attention, but, as I've said, even more innovative was his attempt to create a dictionary of graphic signs to represent the movement of the wind, which he conceived as a circle, a spiral, a curved line, or a series of very fine, parallel straight lines, a repertory that has remained in circulation to the present day. Let us examine some examples. On folio 14 recto of the Codex on the flight of birds, the artist drew in the right margin a circle accompanied by the letters A, B, C, D to indicate the circulation motion, the circular motion of the wind used by the bird in order to remain suspended and balanced during its gliding. So this is the description, and what he's describing is these are currents of air, which is represented in a sketch drawn above the previous one, a distorted circle to visualize the movement of the winged creature that follows the air current, allowing itself to be transported from point A to point C, passing through point B. So basically this movement here, so from A to C, to then exploit, in Leonardo's words, the so-called reflected motion of the wind on the course that from point C returns to the point of departure, passing through point D. So this is at an upper level, so that is designing, so to speak, the gliding of the bird. As far as we know, no one before Leonardo had conceived and visualized the wind in this manner. And in the same manuscript, there are numerous folios where the brilliantly schematic body of a winged creature is supported in flight by a series of very dense parallel lines, which again are a kind of stenographic way of representing the wind. The series of black chalk drawings analyzed above has shown us how Leonardo conceived the movement of a mass of air with curved, twisting lines and even with spirals. The resulting impression is one of uncontrolled chaos, which, however, is much more organized than one has at first impression. But a text of the artist allows us to give some order to this material, I think. In fact, on a folio from Codex K3 in Paris, we read the following phrase: "Every movable thing follows its motion by the shortest path and avoids the impediment or is bent by the impediments. And so the wind curves when penetrating thick air and bends towards the top to lighter air." End of quote. Translated into modern parlance, Leonardo is telling us that in his sketches the spiral signals, so to speak, thick air, while the gentler curves or broken lines indicate light air. These signs help us to perceive the Windsor sketches in a more complex way. What at first glance can seem the result of chaos is in reality profoundly structured in order to make visible the different degrees of transparency and turbulence of the air. And this allows us to appreciate Leonardo's extraordinary graphic virtuosity even more. In other words, what he's trying to do, this is my argument, is trying to give us a depth, and it is not only a question of surface representation of the air. The subject, Leonardo and the wind, is very rich indeed. However, I hope, and we could go on with other observations, however, I hope I have at least succeeded in summarizing the most important aspect of his reflections. The way he moves with great precision between iconographic personification of the phenomenon, mimesis, sign, and abstract conventions, as well as his dedication to scrupulous and prolonged observations in order to shed light on questions about the cosmos, the world, and nature, without neglecting, however, the poetic and playful aspect of the element. Indeed, while Leonardo's research on the wind was predominantly, in our own modern terms, pseudoscientific, this does not mean that he did not appreciate the phenomenon's metaphorical value. Leonardo also uses the wind as a metaphor. For example, he employs it visually as a metaphor for victory. And not by accident, since the victories are also winged figures whose hair is moved by the wind. A celebrated description of a raging massacre reads, this is a very, of course, very well-known quotation, "Show the victors running with their hair and other lightweight things tossed to the wind, and their brows lower. Make the conquered and beaten pay with their brows knee high, and let the skin above the brows be heavily furrowed with pain." The scene concludes in a true bloodbath, but the Florentine soldiers who victorious ride and run with their hair blown by the wind is what remains imprinted in the memory. So the sense of the wind as a metaphorical value also in the representation. Leonardo's theoretical interest in these issues was a fundamental turning point in the history of the representation of air currents, and this research in this field has influenced Western painting up to Poussin and even later. The French artist has painted two canvases which are deeply indebted to Leonardo's writings. The Tale of Pyramus and Thisbe, here on the left-hand side and now in Frankfurt, a painting commissioned by Cassiano dal Pozzo in Rome in 1651, and A Violent Storm, which is shown which is now in the Art Museum in Rouen, also executed in 1651, which is on the right. In the Frankfurt canvas, Poussin depicts the moment immediately before the final tragedy of the unfortunate lovers. For a reason to which we shall later return, it does not illustrate the suicide of the heroine, but rather the moment when she cries out in grief after recognizing the dead body of Pyramus. At the first glance, it would seem that the painter was inspired by Ovid's Metamorphoses to paint a canvas where the gloomy content of the story is immersed in a landscape which reflects the dramatic nature of the tale. But the Ovidian legend unfolds on a windless night, and even the language of the Latin poet is of an infinite sweetness, as in the passage in which he compares Thisbe's shudder to the waves of the sea that are rippled by a light breeze, So Poussin has not turned directly to the classical source, but he may have been inspired by the tragedy Les Amours Tragiques de Pyrame et Thisbe by Théophile de Viau, performed for the first time in 1625 at the court of Louis XIII, until 2 years earlier, during a period when the painter enjoyed living in Paris. And it is possible that Poussin was familiar with de Viau's text, as Oscar Bechmann has proposed. This detail is of real importance, since apparently it's only in this version of the myth that bad weather is described as a metaphor for the ill-fated love of the two characters. The identification of a written source remains, however, uncertain, and one cannot disregard the possibility that Poussin inserted the motives of the storm on his own imagination, on his own initiative. We don't need to find a written source for the painting, so to speak, to show off to his patron his skill at imitating dynamic natural phenomena. Indeed, we can rely on a passage in an extraordinary letter sent by Poussin to his French colleague Jacques Stellin in 1651, in which the artist set out in detail his figurative intention. Unfortunately, our knowledge of the text is only fragmentary and derives from Poussin's great biographer André Philibien, who in 1685 wrote the painter's life. But from then on, it has always been accepted as an original document of the artist's intention. The document is too important not to be quoted in its entirety, also because in this way one cannot immediately understand the affinities that lie, that tie him to Leonardo. So the text is, of course, as a Leonardesque eerie. Poussin writes, I made for Cavalier dal Pozzo a large landscape in which I have tried to depict a storm. So it begins with the storm and not with the iconography, imitating as best as I could the effect of a violent wind, of air dense with darkness, of rain, lightning flashes and bolts that strikes in various places, not without creating great disorder. So the intention, if we can believe the artist, is to represent a storm. That is the most important thing. All the figures one sees are playing their role in deference to the weather. Some flee through the dust, following the course of the wind that drags them along. Others, on the contrary, make their way against the wind and struggle on, covering their eyes with their hands to protect them from the dust. On one side, a shepherd runs away and abandons his flock. Sorry, this is better. On the one side, a shepherd runs away and abandons his flock, seeing a lion that, having brought down some herdsmen, attacks others. Amid this tumult, the dust rises in great whirls. At a certain distance, the dog barks, and its coat bristles without daring to draw near. In the foreground, one sees Pyramus dead and stretched out on the ground, and close to him Thisbe, who surrenders to a grief. End of quote. So it's a long description of the tempest, so to speak, of the storm, and only later, at the very end, becomes the subject which is described. Poussin's letter is an ekphrastic masterpiece, and it's evident that the painter's goal is to compare himself to the great artists of the past, Apelles and Leonardo, thus including himself within a genealogy of great prestige. Pliny the Elder had praised Apelles in his Naturalis Historia for having succeeded in representing what cannot be painted. Thunder, again this acoustic dimension which is interesting, lightning and bolts. This analogy did not escape Poussin's biographer. In the fifth of his Entretien, Philibien in fact maintained that with his landscape with the storm, here on the right, Poussin had wanted to emulate the ancient artist, Apelles. It is true that in his letter, the French painter, a reserved and realistic man, does not evoke thunder, but he does describe the wind, darkness, driving rain, and lightning flashes and bolts that bring us back to Leonardo's text to which we have already referred. In order to evaluate this depth in all its implication, we should recall that Leonardo's Libro della Pittura, of course, was published in Paris in 1651, both in Italian and in French translation, and that both Poussin and Cassiano dal Pozzo played a significant role in this story. I do not, of course, intend to summarize again this very well-known editorial event. I confine myself to point out how the comparison between the image of the man running against the wind in the treatise with the sketch drawn by Francesco Melzi next to the text in the Codice Urbinati Latino in the Vatican is enough to prove that Poussin must have had in his hands a codex that was already partly illustrated. Be that as it may, the fundamental point for our argument is that the figure running against the wind created as an illustration of Leonardo's Libro, return in reverse in Poussin's Rouen Storm, perhaps one cannot see that well in this slide, and is used as a model for the Frankfurt Thisbe. And this proves that Poussin wanted to measure himself against not only Apelles but also Leonardo. Indeed, Poussin's paintings are almost a translation into visual form of Leonardo's texts, and it cannot be an accident that they were both executed in 1651, the year when the first edition of the treatise on painting appeared. The French artist has perfectly understood his source, especially when he insisted upon describing the dust raised by the wind, as the Florentine artist had done in the long description of a violent massacre. Indeed, Leonardo was the first to perceive that there was only one way to render the transparency of the air, namely to paint its impurities. Grains of sand or a line of bluish smoke, everything that being light can emerge and be transported by the atmosphere. One last point must be stressed. I'm referring to Thisbe's desperate cry. Distancing himself from the iconographic tradition, Poussin does not depict the heroine at the moment when she takes her life, but rather at an earlier moment, in order to stimulate the spectator's imagination, or coinvolgimento, so to speak. If the painter captures from the inspiration a cry of grief, the informed viewer who knows that the protagonist will soon kill herself on a lover's sword and that nothing can be done to stop her, participates in the events, becoming personally involved, because he or she follows her fate at close hand, finding himself or herself in the position of one who might prevent the tragedy's final act and still cannot intervene. We are powerless in front of this tragedy, but we can only observe. In this way, Poussin activates a sort of visual equivalent of a rhetorical prolapsus. We are awaiting, so to speak, what is going to happen afterwards. 20 years later, a critic as cultivated as Giovan Pietro Bellori was not able to perceive the importance of this rhetorical device. In his description of the canvas, in his famous lines, Thisbe runs with her arms open above the corpse without crying. So Bellori doesn't hear the cry, so to speak, which is so important for Poussin. While the writer imagines and hears among the clouds the crash of thunder that Poussin had deliberately ignored in his written description. However, also Bellori could not fail to note the trees shaken and bent by the wind in the turmoil, since they are a sign of the horror aroused in the viewer by the tragic story of the unfortunate lover, in the sense that this landscape is a metaphor of the sentiments of the depicted figures. But it seems to me of paramount importance that Poussin and Bellori approach the tragic tale from two radically different positions and directions. While the artist began his story with the atmospheric condition as an omen and tragic metaphor for what would follow, the writer opened his description with its reference to the authority of the text of Ovid, who, as we have seen, was not the source for the canvas. In other terms, Poussin was interested in how to represent a narrative episode, so the tempest, the metaphor, the visual metaphor, Bellori in what was represented. In other words, in the iconography, in the old dilemma between word and image. A phenomenal turn promoted by Leonardo and Poussin, among others, has opened up new territories for Western painting. In late antiquity and during the Middle Ages, the visual metaphor had been exclusively supported by personification and symbols. In the early modern period and afterwards, the visual metaphor of the wind was connected with a more realistic representation of the natural phenomenon. Indeed, it seems plausible to maintain that the turn impressed by Leonardo, and he plays a major role in this story, to the representations of air transparencies in particular, and to the phenomenal world in general, had as a collateral effect the growth, intensification, and diversification of the elements metaphorical use in the visual culture of the early modern period. If we look at the history of art in its entirety, we can conclude that one had to wait for Leonardo and his contemporaries to serialize a more truthful representation of the natural phenomena as the one they are described on the screen. Seen as metaphors of individuals' state of mind, their interior trouble and anxiety, their pain and joy. It must be stressed, however, that in this trend towards an increasing use of visual metaphor, there are no sharp historical divisions, no sharp cesure. The symbolic representations of the natural phenomena have not disappeared all of a sudden, as we have seen with the first slide. They have continued to play their function together with new modes of representation. It is, however, relatively safe to maintain, and this is my main thesis, that Leonardo's intense research in the field of natural philosophy nourished a process of constant growth in this sector. Leonardo's ambition to capture with the graphic means at his disposal, the natural phenomena, in all their complexity and fleeting moments, has transformed our relationship with the elements, which have acquired visually a more intense metaphorical meaning. It was this move that allowed his fellow artists in the centuries to follow to exploit always more self-consciously their openly metaphorical connotations in painting. And when we see, for example, a painting like this one, which is also a marvelous painting by Fuseli of the Maid Kate, it is the wind comes from two different directions, from right and from left, mixing and creating a kind of disturbed images, which is a metaphor for their madness, because she has lost her lover on the sea. I think that without Leonardo, it would have been impossible to reach a purely metaphor of the visuality of the wind. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. So thank you very much indeed. One thing I realised I was supposed to say before we began was that if anyone wants to use the library or join it, there are forms at reception which you should fill in. I was instructed to say that. But what about questions for Alessandro?
Thank you very much.
Can you speak up?
Yes, please. As this metaphorical form of imagery studies, right, of Leonardo da Vinci, is there anywhere by Da Vinci himself in which we can see this metaphorical rendition of natural phenomena?
So in the writings, you mean?
No, I mean in the painting.
In the painting?
Yes.
More in the drawings. I was just... No, I don't think so. We don't know such. I mean, the drawings, I think so. I mean, for example, exactly when he's, just what is the famous drawing with Oeuvre also published his dissertation of the nymph, of the nymph with moving hairs. There is this kind of tendency to represent movement, certainly. But as I mentioned, his writings is perhaps more acute when he describes these battles, these enormous battles, strange massacre, etc., which is usually connected with the Battle of Anghiari, which is written 10 years before. So it's not possible. There is exactly, he's depicting this wind blowing through the hairs of the people who are fighting as a metaphor, so to speak, of liberty, of freedom, which I think is very interesting. And in some of these drawings, the Battle of Anghiari, you find also this type of, perhaps we have to read them in this way. So my point was that we have, until now, as far as I know, at least placed enough attention to read these signs that, they're not static, but they're meant to be dynamic.
I know this is a different question, but it's really a hard one that I'm asking myself all the time. Ernst Gombrich referred to the conventionality of the signs of depiction of water and air, right?
Yes.
Their abstract quality, their non-naturalness, if you want. You opened that up very carefully and included other models like sign, convention, visual metaphor. That opening up, I think, marks a real problem because you're still using terms of, in the end, of linguistic analysis. Like, what is the relationship between sign, convention, visual metaphor, and the phenomenological part that you also include, the observational part? It's still an open question. Right? We always refer back to the other model, which is related to linguistics. But you had something else in mind, I think.
Well, I mean, you have to somehow to express in words what you mean. So of course you have to use that. But I think one can, I don't know, perhaps I'm going to, just, you have always to read everything, and with Leonardo perhaps it is a difficult thing. But I think that you can read, if you read his text when he's talking about these spiral movements, how the wind moves in the air. This wonderful passage in the treatise K3, I think, in Paris. I thought, for the first time, that I could perhaps make more sense of what's going on here. It's telling us, the spiral air creates even the spiral forms indicate that the air is thicker, and the other when you see the air bending, it's a kind of lighter air. I think we have to take him seriously. I think there is a relationship between his text and what we've seen on the screen. In the sense that it's not kind of superficial way, but there are different thickness of hair, what is represented in his drawing. As far as the signs, you were mentioning, yes, I do agree with you. It's going perhaps too far, but there is a kind of, for example, when he's doing these parallel lines just to depict what you see, this is a presentation of the air sustaining the bird. There are graphic conventions that we can use in a kind of semiotic way. I don't think that it is a kind of. I think you can open it up in this way. In any case, the important thing is that if it helps you to see the drawings or to see the work better, then I think it does.
Okay, there are three, with a line of three. Okay.
Might there be a connection with the drawing you showed on the left-hand side with the lines of those pouring lines of air and the vortices?
Yes.
With some of his studies of water, the movement of water. And this one convention, so to speak, of replicating the movement of water actually is channeled into the representation of the movement of air.
This kind of analogy between the water and the air. Certainly, it is certainly true.
You connect your discourse with Vinci, is great, but I mean, I was interested that constables who take the representation of natural effects onto a new level also had a copy of Leonardo's treatise, and himself trying to apply in some of his nature drawings. He uses the framework through glass, and actually later on to this sword. And it's intriguing that although he takes this back to Gombrich, the representation of nature a step further, he is also drawing on these very old sources and directly on Leonardo.
It's brilliant. I mean, I think that James Morton's constable exactly was trying just to photograph seconds, appearances of the wind, how it moves around.
A critic called Constable sketches an instant snatch from time.
Yes, an instant snatch.
An instant snatch from time.
No, it's very good. But I think there is a prehistory here as well with Leonardo on many levels. And there is another point I think we have to take seriously, is kind of auditory dimension. I don't know if you agree with it or not, but I think we have to hear somehow these things like the text of the feeling. There's a kind of sound. But this is going too far.
Okay, I think probably we should stop now. Although I think already seen a whole raft of rich themes that we can explore through there.